Good af- Good morning. This is September 12th. My name is Doug Griffin. This is my Sunday school class. We are in the book of Genesis, and we've just been going through. We started last March, and at Genesis 1, and we're now at Genesis chapter 40. And it took only a year and 9 months. But we just go verse by verse and really try to explore what the scriptures say. You get a better interpretation of the Bible and understanding of God's word when you read everything in context. And so there are verses that we're reading sometimes. We go, oh, that's what that means, because now you can see the context that it was in. So we've been studying Joseph, who was thrown into a pit by his brothers, his fault. Um, and so Joseph has been in Egypt. He was taken out of the pit by the Ishmaelites, and the Ishmaelites sold him to Potiphar in Egypt. And while at Potiphar's house, he got in trouble. Not his fault. Well, not his fault, but he, Joseph has a problem reading people. And um, Potiphar's wife gave him many signs that she was crazy. And Joseph, who's only ever been taught to look at himself by his father, you're my favorite, and your mother was my favorite, and here's a coat so I can just prove to everybody that you're my favorite, grew up thinking I'm the favorite. Naturally, that's not his fault. But that's still something that has to be broken in him. So Potiphar's wife came up and basically said, "I'm going to get you," and he thought, "No, you're not." So she got him, um, and then she lied about it, and Joseph ends up in prison, and that's where we find him in Genesis chapter 40. So it came to pass after these things, Genesis chapter 40, verse 1. Would love for you to have Bibles and read along with me because I don't want you to think I'm making this up. I know you're not, don't think I'm making it up, but it's just so great. Okay, it came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. So the butler and the baker. This is not the butler that we're thinking Jeeves, who makes your bed and fixes your curtains. The butler was responsible for anything that the king drank, making sure that no one had poisoned it, right? He was the royal taster. So the butler and the baker were like two of Pharaoh's most trusted men in his inner circle. You cook my food, you make sure I get something to drink, and that no one's trying to kill me. So I have to really trust these guys. So they did something that bugged him. And so the king put them in jail. Didn't kill them, but he put them in jail. It could have been a simple thing. I don't know, you burnt the toast and you spilt the wine. Go off, off with their heads, like the Queen of Hearts. But anyway, they're in prison. It says, and Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison, the place where Joseph was also confined. So there's a prison basically next to the house of the captain of the guard. He had a nice house, I'm sure, and a prison was next to him uh, for special prisoners, right? Not the rank and file person who had stolen a brick while they were building a pyramid, but more higher ranking, white collar crime. Okay, so who is this captain of the guard? Genesis 39:1 says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. So Potiphar hadn't put Joseph too far away. He just put him in the prison next to his house, which implies that he kind of believed his wife and kind of didn't. Because if he really believed his wife, he would have had him killed. So maybe he just made this move to appease his wife, like, you're kind of sketchy. Um, so Joseph has been in this prison, and they're put there. And the captain of the guard, verse 4, charged Joseph with them, and he served them So they were in custody for a while. And this for a while, for a season is another translation. There are some rabbinic traditions that say this was for a year, that they were put into jail on Pharaoh's birthday the previous year. I mean, on Pharaoh's birthday, and it's a year later on Pharaoh's birthday that they do get out. So that this might have been for years. So they might have done something. They messed up his birthday, and he gives them a chance because they are let out on his birthday. He gives them a chance on his birthday to redeem themselves. Um, but it says for a while, so we don't know how long they were there. But it says that he's serving them, and that's very important. So they're in custody for a while. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, this is verse 5, had a dream. Both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. So they didn't have the same dream. Each dream's going to have its own interpretation, but it was significant. Yes. Oh, good. Good morning, Susie and Jax and Maddie. Good. Yay. Okay. I just checking to make sure I'm on the air because I will talk for 20 minutes and then find out I pushed the wrong button. So people have already kind of checked in to let me know, which is cool. But you don't have to do that. So they both have a dream. So sometimes you have a dream because you saw a scary movie or because you're worried about your rent due. And it's your own dream that you're making up yourself. Your mind is working on trying to solve a problem or you're reliving some experience. And then sometimes you have dreams like, wow, that was an odd dream. Where'd that come from? And you're kind of aware. I think this means something. I don't know what it means. And that was their experience. They both had a dream in the same night, and they thought that's significant. So it says, verse 6. This is a verse I'm going to sit on for a while. And Joseph came into them in the morning, and he looked at them and saw that they were sad. This is new for Joseph. Joseph has been broken because Joseph is not aware of what other people are thinking or feeling. So something has happened to Joseph in that he's actually looking in other people and not just thinking about himself and where he should be and how good he looks. And God's done something to Joseph, which is why he's in the prison, and which is why we sometimes in the situations that we are in, because God's doing something to affect our character, to change us so that he can move us to that next level. And Joseph will soon be moved to another level. But this is important. So something's happened to Joseph so that he's actually looking at them and going, what's going on with you guys? Now, I'm going to do a review because Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Judah, these characters, God's singling them out and showing us their story, not because he's trying to fill up space, like he gets paid by the word or something, but because he's needing us to learn something about how he deals with people. So we're not reading the Bible just because it's a beautiful book, but God's showing his personality, saying, this is what I do. So please study this, because then you'll understand what's going on in your own life. I want to go back to Abraham because, well, we're just going to study how God broke each of these people, because God has broken Joseph here. I just want to look back. In Genesis chapter 17, verse 15 through 19, it says, Then God said to Abraham, as for Sarah, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, with an AI at the end, but Sarah shall be her name, and I will bless her. So he's giving her a distinction because I need you to see her as the mother of many nations. That's not quite what Sarah means, but she's been this barren woman her whole life, and I want you to see her differently. And I will bless her and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed at God. This is fantastic. And he said in his heart, because he wouldn't say it out loud, but God can read your heart. So that's why it's in the book. Oh, I know what you were feeling, and I'm writing it down in the book. So in his heart, he thought to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old, and shall Sarah, who's 90 years old, bear a child? Now, God has appeared before him. This is not the neighbor down the street saying, hey, something's going on. And you're like, is something really going on? God has shown up and said, here's what I'm going to do. And Abraham's like, I don't know if I agree with that. That doesn't make sense. Now, that has to be broken in Abraham, because Abraham in his head can argue with God sometimes and just do things in his way. When Abraham went down to Egypt because there was a famine, which was his choice to go down to Egypt, God may have driven him down to Egypt, or God may have had provisions that he stayed there. But Abraham decided, I'm going down to Egypt. When he got there, he says, I've got a plan. Sarah, you're going to pretend like you're my sister because because I don't think God can protect me, basically, and they're going to kill me, you know, because God's not really here. God lives in Canaan, but I don't think he lives here. So, and a lot of times we think that, oh, God's at church, but if we're somewhere else, I don't know if God's going to answer prayer here. Uh, I don't know that God is at school or God's at work or in this God's not in the prison or I don't know what we think. But Abraham certainly thought, well, God's not here. So I've got to have a plan. And he's a planner, he's a schemer. He lived in a culture where they didn't have like set prices and a government that said, this is going to cost this much money and that's going to, you bargained all the time and you had to kind of convince people and persuade them and sell them things and come up with a price. And you won if you got the advantage and was able to manipulate the situation. And that's just the culture, you know, in order to live, to survive, you had to do whatever you needed to do to get the advantage over the other person so that you can sell to them. Not that they don't do that today. If you don't use this particular toothpaste, your teeth will all fall out. I mean, you know, they still have to sell us things on the television every day, right? Or on the radio and manipulate us and make you think you have embarrassing elbow odor. And so you better buy this product. Oh, I do. Yeah, my elbows, they do smell. Oh my goodness. I better buy that. And they can, you know, so, but in this case, the whole culture, everyone was this way, where you try to get the advantage over somebody. So Abraham was just raised to think, okay, this guy's gonna try to take you, so I'll fool him by. So, so he's arguing with God. God says Sarah's gonna have a child. Okay, and I'm 100 and she's 90, and I don't think so, right? So Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." Like he's telling God, "Here's a better plan. I've already have an Ishmael." God is standing in front of him, and Abraham's correcting God because Abraham has always just planned his own life. So God said, "No, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son." And then God would have to argue with somebody. "No, I think I want to do it my way. And you shall call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant with his descendants after him." So now Isaac is born. Abraham's got this Isaac. And he's probably got his whole life planned out. Okay, I'm going to do this with Isaac and do that because Abraham's a planner. There's nowhere that Abraham didn't go that he didn't think, okay, I've got to buy this parcel of land. I've got to do this. Let me come up with a plan. Abraham's a planner. It's not a terrible thing to be a planner. Some people are planners, but it's just a terrible thing when your plan supersedes God's plan. When God's trying to tell you his plan and you think, oh, that's pretty good, God, but I think I got a better plan. Yeah, I don't like it. So this has to be broken in Abraham, and I'm just getting to the understand that Joseph had to be broken. So, and because God can't, I can't use you if I can't break you and put you together the way I want you. So this particular thing had to be broken in Abraham. So in Genesis 22, verse 2, God says to Abraham, "Now take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offering there is a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you." Wait, God, you just gave me this son and came and told me, oh, he's going to be many nations, and now I have to give him up. Yeah, because you still think you own him. You think you created him, that he came through you, and you've got his life planned, and I've got to get you to let go of that and understand that I own him. I brought him into the world. You just the vessel that he came through. I've got a plan for him, but as long as you think it's your plan, then it's not going to work. So I need you to go and let him go and sacrifice and let him go. And sometimes God will make us sacrifice our Isaacs, the things that God gave us, but we're taking too much ownership of it. We're taking too much control of it. And so we got to let it go. Not forever, but let it go long enough that we really understand who owns it. And so he has to take his son up on the hill. Uh, Now, verse 9, then they came to the place of God, which God had told him. This is Genesis 22. And Abraham built an altar there and placed wood in order, and he bound Isaac, his son, and laid him on the altar. Now, Isaac is in his 30s. He's not 8 years old like that was shown. And he's like, what's going on? And God's we're gonna do a sacrifice. And then so he binds him on the altar. There was a struggle. Like, what's happening here? Why am I the sacrifice? Um, and Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. Like, okay, God, I now can, everything is yours. I must do, and I guess you're going to raise him from the dead, but I'm willing now to just follow you and whatever your plan is not mine. And that was good for Abraham, bad for Isaac. Okay, so Isaac's in a situation. I think my father just tried to kill me. So in verse 19, it says, Abraham returned to his young man after, God provides the lamb and all of that. And everything's good. We're all friends now. Isaac's like, I'm not sure. So Abraham, it says, returned to his young men, the people who'd come with him, right? Only Abraham and Isaac went up the hill and he came back down. And they rose and went together to Beersheba. This is significant. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. So right after Isaac is almost like, my father took up a knife and was going to kill me because God told him to. They all went to Beersheba and they lived there for a while. Now, when Isaac gets married, he didn't go near Beersheba for years. Even though that they got dwelling, that's what, even after his father is dead, I'm not going to Beersheba. And that's significant. When you read through, he went here, he went there, he went everywhere but Beersheba. Until he was finally forced to. So in Genesis chapter 26:15, because now something in Isaac has to be broken, right? I don't trust God is what Isaac is naturally thinking. I don't trust. Now here's what happens. Something happens to us and we write a story about it in our minds. We go shopping and you lose sight of your mother for 5 minutes, who said, keep your eyes on me, but you didn't. You got distracted. I'm talking as a little kid, right? And then your mom goes somewhere, and then I can't find her, and you're crying, right? And then you finally find your mom, and there's a couple stories you can write. Oh, isn't it wonderful how mom finds me no matter where I am? See, that's just like God. He'll find you. But we write the story, mom didn't care about me. You forgot about me. You almost left. No one loves me. And this is the story we write in our heads. It's not the real truth. It's not the truth. But we'll write a story as kids. And God has to break that story. It's the story we've come up with, how we interpret life. I have no friends, or I'm all on my own, or. So Isaac, I'm telling you, had a story in his head of, I can't trust God because at any moment a knife may come out at me. So he doesn't trust it. Now, in Genesis 26 verse 15, it says, now the Philistines had stopped up all the wells which his father's servant had dug. Talking about Isaac. So Abraham had dug a bunch of wells in this certain area. And again, Isaac is avoiding Beersheba, hasn't been back there for years. So that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham, his father, and they had filled them with earth. So Abraham had gone to this area. When Abraham went to Abimelech, and he did the same thing. Okay, Sarah, don't tell him that you're my wife. And, same thing, right? Because I don't trust God's not going to come through, and I got to come up with a plan. And God's breaking Abraham of that. You got to come up with a plan. No, you don't. You just got to follow me. So he dug a bunch of wells when he was there in Abimelech with the Philistines. And now Isaac is finally going back to that. He's still not in Beersheba, but he's at least going back to these areas that he's been avoiding. But all the wells have been filled up. And verse 16 of Genesis 26 says, and Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you're much mightier than, get out of here. You got all this big army that your father left you. You got to leave. So Isaac departed from there in verse 17 and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father. So he's trying to renew his father. He kind of ignored all of his father's stuff for years, but now this father is dead. I miss my dad, and he's getting nostalgic, and he's going back and digging up all these wells. And sometimes we have a strained relationship, and then when that person's gone, we suddenly, oh, I wish so and so was here, and we take out the old pictures, and which we should have done while they were alive. And Isaac should have done this while Abraham was alive, but he's finally redigging all these wells, right? For the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham. He called them by the names which his father had called them. This well is this, and this well is that. And I'm renaming these wells, and I'm redigging this stuff, and going back into my father's stuff, and I'm reclaiming my youth. Okay, verse 19 says, and Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found a well running water there. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, hey, this water is ours. So he called the name of that well Esek, which means contention, because they had a big fight. Like, he thought he had found the new well, because he redid all of Abraham's wells, but he said, oh, I've got a new well. They said, no, you don't. That's ours. Okay. So then verse 21 says, then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also. So he called its name Sitnah, which means quarrel again. It means fight. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over that one. So he called its name Rehoboth, which means room. Like, finally, I've got room to do my own thing, because he said, for now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. So after he dug up all his father's stuff and finally went back to places he'd ignored his whole life, he started digging his own wells. So now he felt good about himself. Verse 23 says, then he went up from there to Beersheba, which he had not been to since the knife came out and his father tried to kill him. He avoided Beersheba. This is not a coincidence. He finally went back. That was like the last place. Now, God had spoken to Abraham several times. God had never spoken to Isaac. Isaac had not an experience where God had spoken to him. It's not till he went back to Beersheba, the place that they'd gone to right after he'd had that experience. Says, verse 22 says, and the Lord appeared to him that same night. So finally, God is speaking to Isaac because he's finally gone back to that's something that he'd been avoiding. And sometimes that's a story we write. Oh, I can never do that because that's going to be bad. Because we had a bad experience. We walked down the street and a dog barked at us and scared us. So I never go down that street. Well, now that street owns you, right? It's, that street is more powerful than you. And sometimes you got to force yourself. No, I'm going to go back down that street. I'm not going to be afraid of that street, or I'm not going to be afraid of this thing, or there's some fear in our head that we've said, oh, never do that because you had a bad experience with it. So you never. Like, no, now that thing's owning you, and all that fear is controlling you instead of God controlling. God doesn't want anything else to control us but him. And so if God tells you not to go, that's fine. But if you're telling yourself, I'm not going to go there, then when God tells you to go, you're like, no, God, I'm not going there. And you're not going to hear him. And God's like, okay, I got it. I'm not going to force you to go because you've got this block in your head. And that thing's controlling you more than I am. And God says, I'm a jealous God. I'm not going to have anything control you more than me, even an old fear. So when he finally went back to Beersheba, God speaks to Isaac for the first time in his life. And he says, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you. I will multiply your descendants for my servant Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there and called on the name of the Lord for the first time in his life. And he pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants dug a well. So, okay. And Isaac's all about digging wells. And Abraham is all about building altars. He just loved to build some altars. But he's like, I love to dig wells. So now Isaac realizes, okay, God is for me too. So I got to get this block away, but it's not totally away. Okay. So Isaac has twins. His wife says, oh, God spoke to me and said the younger is going to actually rule over the older brother. And then Isaac watches them grow up and he thinks, I don't think so. Esau's got his life together, and Jacob he's a mess. And so God is wrong. You can't trust God. God has picked the wrong person, because that's the earliest lesson that he learned. You can't trust God. He pull a knife out. You may think there's a lamb, but no, surprise, it's you. You're the offering. Like, oh, God will just trick you and God will fool you. And that's the story that he told himself about what happened. Instead of God will protect you, or God has a plan, or God is whatever the story was that God wanted him to learn. He taught himself a different story. So God sometimes have to rewrite the story we've written in our heads. So Esau's not Esau. Isaac is not trusting God. He knows the prophecy that the younger is supposed to rule over the older, but he's like, no. So in Genesis 27, verse 1 through 4, it says, now it came to pass when Isaac was old and his eyes were so dim that he couldn't see, that he called Esau, his older son, and said, my son. And he answered him, here am I. And he said, behold, now I'm old. I do not know the day of my death. I may be dead soon, basically he's saying. Now, therefore, please take away your weapons, your quiver, not take away, but take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out in the field, hunt some game for me, and make me some savory food, such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat it, and that my soul may bless you before I die, because I could be dying any minute, and I want to bless you. And this is only between me and you. Don't tell your mom. Don't tell anybody else. Of course, Rebecca overheard this, but he doesn't know that. And because I'm going to bless you, because God is wrong. So, of course, Rebecca and Jacob come up with this scheme, and they dress up Jacob like Esau, and Jacob gets the blessing instead, because he was supposed to get the blessing, because God already said the older son, is going to serve the younger, and the younger is going to be over the older. You can't get around God. We think we can, but if God has something in the works, it's going to happen. We can't circumvent it as much as we try. So he blesses the wrong person, and then Esau shows up, and in verse 32 it says, and Father Isaac said to him, who are you? So he said, I'm your son, your firstborn Esau. He's like, wait, wasn't Esau just here? Then Isaac trembled exceedingly, said, who? Well, then where's the one who hunted game and brought it to me? Because I see all of it. I ate all of it before you came, and I blessed him. And then he says, and indeed he shall be blessed. I realized, okay, I tried to fool God, but you can't get around God. God knows what he's doing. My old programming said, you can't trust God, but God knows what he's doing. He's going to bless that boy. And he realizes, okay, God is sovereign, and I need to follow. Because Esau starts crying, can't you bless me? And he's like, no, sorry, he got your blessing. God wins in the end. And he realizes, oh, the lesson from that thing that happened with Abraham was that I have to let God win. I have to do what God says. It's not my will. Just like my father was willing to sacrifice me, because his will is more important than mine. Oh, that's what that lesson was. The lesson wasn't supposed to be you can't trust God. The lesson is what God's want is more important than what you want. So even though I wanted you, Esau, to be, inherit everything because you're the manly one, and it's going to go on Isaac. What God wants is more important than me. I finally got the right lesson. Oh, okay, got it. So now Jacob has learned the wrong lessons, right? And this is all how God breaks people in different ways, because God broke Joseph. God broke Joseph so that he's actually looking at their faces and going, what's going on with you guys? And that's new for Joseph. Okay. So Jacob grew up thinking, I've got to be on the run. Because right after this, of course, Esau chases Jacob, right? I'm going to kill Jacob. I'm going to kill him. And then so Rebecca's like, run and go to live with your uncle. And Jacob grows up thinking, wow, I'm just going to be on the run my whole life. And the only way I can get anything is to scheme. And God is not really looking out for me. And I'm weak. And he has all sorts of things running in through his head, which is why God shows up and wrestles with him on purpose when he's running from Laban and running from Esau, like simultaneously. Laban's behind him, Esau's in front of him, and Jacob is panicked more than anything in his life. And an angel shows up and wrestles with him. And then the angel touches his thighs, and cripples him so that he can't run anymore. Like, I'm not here to help you run from your brother. I'm here to prevent you from running to your brother, because you need to learn that I will protect you. You are strong. You think you're weak, but you're strong. So, and he said, so they're wrestling, and in Genesis 32, and he's wrestling. I'm sorry. Oh, That's weird. Sorry. I just, I just called my wife with my phone in my pocket somehow.
Hello.
Honey, I'm on television. Can you see me? Okay. So anyway, so he's got the whole wrong impression. Jacob has this, yeah, Jacob, he's the one that ran, that he's weak. He's got this impression. And so God's got to break that in him. You're not, you think you're weak. And and there's a specific thing that God's passing down to the people that he's choosing. I'm taking your life and making an example, and what's happening to you is going to help so many people. uh, like I said, like a teacher might pick a particular student, come up here and let me and use them as the example, right? And watch how they're doing this, and see their form. And the coach might see how this hitter's got the bat just right. You pick somebody, and they become the example, for good or for bad, right? See how they're missing that, but don't do that. Or see how they're hitting, do that, right? And so God has said, I'm choosing these people because I'm going to teach the world how I operate and what happens when you obey me, what happens when you disobey me. So he selects certain people, and then he breaks them and makes them he molds them like the clay into what he wants them to be. So Jacob, this angel's wrestling with him. He's already crippled him. In Genesis 32:26, he says, and he said, let me go, for the day breaks. But he said, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. Jacob's like, you got to bless me. Okay. So he said to him, well, what's your name? This is the blessing. And sometimes people, this is the blessing. He says, okay, what's your name? He says, Jacob. And he says, your name should no longer be called Jacob. Here's your blessing. Because Jacob means deceiver. Jacob means supplanter, or somebody who gets ahead only by taking someone else's place. That's not who you are. That's what they named you because that's what they thought was going on. But that's not. And so you have that in your head. I could only get ahead in life if I deceive people. But you're going to be Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. Look how strong you were. And of course, the angel let him win. Just like your dad may wrestle with the kid or something, and oh, you pinned me, so that they think, oh, look, I've got strength. Look what I did to daddy. Well, of course, daddy lets you do that. Sometimes, in some situations, it's good to let people feel good about themselves. They don't have to win every single time, because then they get that false Joseph sort of thing, like I win every time. That's not what you want to teach people, but you do want to encourage them. Like why discourage them and make them think I'm a mess? So in this particular case, the angel said, I'm going to let you win, and I'm going to show you that you don't have to be afraid. You have strength. You can face your brother, and you'll be okay. You'll prevail. You're not the runner. That's not who. You're not the deceiver. You're a different person. I got to break that in you. So Jacob learns this lesson. Then he has kids, and he picks Joseph. Bless their hearts. Abraham picked Ishmael. Isaac picked Esau. They all picked the wrong one. Come on, God, this surely is the one. And that just shows me that must be what we do when we're looking for the next whatever. We picked the wrong one. Oh, it's got to be that person because they're rich and powerful. It's got to be that person because they're handsome and this. And God has a whole different person in mind on purpose. He will pick the unlikely person on purpose so that you'll know that it's God and not that person, right? So he picked Joseph. Joseph, you're the one that's going to carry on my name, and you're the one that God's blessed. So Joseph's in the situation where his father has showered so much attention on him, lavished all this praise on him, that the world revolves around Joseph in his mind. I've read this to you before, but I just picking out specific things again. So in Genesis chapter 37, beginning with verse 4, but when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him. Now this is Jacob's fault. It's not Joseph's fault. Jacob's saying, he's the blessed one. He's the blessed. Well, you're causing envy. So it's not Joseph's fault that his brother hated him. It's Joseph's fault that he did not pick up on it. says they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So that means every time they saw him, what do you want? Get out of here, brother. And Joseph's like, they love me. Now Joseph had a dream and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more.
Yeah.
So he said to them, please hear this dream which I've dreamed. And there we were binding sheaves, and he tells them this whole dream. And so he's good with dreams. He realizes, I know what this means. There were sheaves, and then they all bowed down to my. So I know what that means. And his brother said, "Oh, you're gonna have dominion over us?" I don't think so. So they hated him even more for his dreams. So and he can't look at. So I love. Okay, verse 8. So they hated him even more for his dream. Verse 9. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers. So they hated him for his dream. I hate that dream. I hate you. I hate that dream. Oh, I had another dream. Let me tell it to you. What is wrong with you? He can't see people. Joseph cannot see people. He only sees what he wants to see. He's not really seeing the people in front of him and seeing the anger on their face. He has created a world, the story he's told himself. Everyone loves me, because that's what his father said. Everyone loves you. You deserve a coat. And so he's not really seeing. People are saying, I hate you. And he hears, I love you. And so God has to break that in him. He says, I dreamed another dream. At this time, the sun, the moon, and the stars are all bowing down to me. And like they're going to like that if he can't see. So this is fascinating. In Genesis, going back to where we are, Genesis chapter 40, verse 6 says, and Joseph came into them in the morning, and he looked at them and saw they were sad. And that's something that Joseph didn't look at his brothers and saw that they hated him. Remember, when his father sent him, go check on your brothers. He didn't say, Dad, they don't really like me. Maybe should send somebody else. People who are aware of other people will say things like that. You should go talk to them. No, that person's kind of upset with me. Because you can see. Joseph just, oh, sure, I'll walk on them. My brothers, I'll check on them and telling them, and they'll just love it. They won't even mind. So he can't see. They were plotting his death as he's approaching them, and he's shocked out of his mind. What has happened to Joseph? How did he get to this place where he's finally looking at these people who are not him, that doesn't even really know that well, that he's serving, and actually saying, oh, you're sad, and ask them, why are you sad? So what's changed in Joseph's life? Because he couldn't see that Potiphar's wife was going to seduce him. He couldn't see that his brothers were going to, he can't see. Now he can see. Well, God has helped write a different story, because the story he had in his head is it's all about you. Everything revolves around you. They're all going to bow down to you, and the world's going to bow. And yet, and when he's taken to Potiphar's house, when he's thrown into the pit, which shocked the mess out of him, he's given charge over Potiphar's things, and he's ordering people around. Like, okay, this must be the fulfillment of that dream, because I'm in charge, and I'm, look what. So this thing happens to him where he doesn't look and he doesn't see what's going on, and and he's thrown in prison, and now he has to wait on other people. So he's no longer in charge. These prisoners get there, and it says he has to serve them. And this is the opposite of the dream. Like, wow, I guess I was wrong. And again, this is the Isaac that you have to sacrifice, because sometimes God will give you a dream and we have the wrong interpretation of the dream, or God will give you a vision, or God will say something to you. It's your Isaac. We have the wrong interpretation sometimes. We add our own context to it, and we add to what God has said and start off in a wrong direction. And so God has to break it for a while, clean it up, and then he give it back to you, and you go, oh, that's what God meant, not what it. For example, my wife's nephew just got an award from USC, this very prestigious award, celebrating the 75th anniversary of USC School of Dramatic Arts, and he's an actor, and they presented him with this Broadway Spotlight Award, and it's a lovely award, and he got up and gave a speech. Well, let's say 5 or 10 years ago, I was looking at my nephew, and then, I'm watching the Tonys. Maybe I'm watching the Tonys on television, the Broadway Award, and then God says, your nephew's going to get an award, and I go, he's going to get a Tony, because I'm watching the Tonys. And then I heard God said, your nephew's going to get an award. And so I put two and two together. And I call him up. You're going to be on Broadway and you're going to get a Tony Award and blah, blah, blah. And that may not have been what God was talking about. It may have been exactly what happened at USC when he got a Broadway Spotlight Award, but it wasn't from Broadway. It's from USC. And that's what God, okay. So I have him trying to get to the Tonys every year. And that's not what God said. God didn't say that. I added that in.
Into the stage.
He breaks in. I'm supposed to get a Tony Award. Give it to my uncle told me that God said I was going to get a Tony. That's not what God said. But we add to it because it makes sense. I'm sitting watching the Tonys. Why would God tell me that while I'm watching the Tonys unless that's what he meant? Well, no, that's not. So Joseph had a certain interpretation of that dream, and now it's clearly not happening in his head. Oh, I am serving other people. So my whole worldview is wrong. If I think everybody's supposed to be serving me and they're bowing down to me, so he broke that. Like I could let that go. He had to kill his Isaac. God had to kill his Isaac, right? He had to say, because you're never going to understand what I want you to do as long as you're holding on to your interpretation of what I said to you. So people have thought they heard from God. A lot of times they did. But it's not happening like, I must have made that up. No, you didn't make that up. You just added to it. But if you can go back to what God purely said to you, and sometimes we can't remember what the pure thing is anymore because we've added so much to it. God doesn't care. That doesn't stop God. But he just has to break us sometimes and send us in a different direction so that we are now free spirit. We're not knocking on the door of the Tonys every time, trying to get into it. Like you've let that go. And then God can now use you and put you where you're supposed to be. And so he had to let that go. Joseph, they're not all good. Joseph saw them bowing down. He knows that in Canaan, because that's all he knew. My brothers are going to bow down to me in Canaan, and I will own all of Canaan land, and I will live. And that's what that meant. And I'm going to rule over them. And that because the brothers complained, oh, you're going to rule over us, and you're going to. And that's not what the dream meant, but that was his interpretation. So now that he was in prison, waiting on other people, he said, okay, I need to let that go. And for the first time, he's not looking at himself all the time with a mirror. Oh, I look so good. He's forced to look at other people. So he walked in them and he looked at them and saw that they were sad. Like he never saw that his brothers were angry. He never saw that Potiphar's wife was lustful. But because he'd been broken, he finally saw that they were sad. And it says that he says to them, so he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody of his Lord's house, saying, why do you look sad today? Things he never came up to his brothers and said, so tell me about your dreams. Does God give you dreams? We're never interested in anybody else but himself. Why do you look sad today? And they said to him, well, we each had a dream, and there's no interpreter for it. And so I'm ending there. We'll talk about the dreams and what they meant next week and how God used that, etc., and why God still kept him in prison even longer. But just know that if God has spoken to us, we've probably added something to it. We've written some story in our head, or we've had some bad experience. We've written some story about it, and that God puts us in various experiences to change our thinking, to break and rewrite the story that's in our head, and to chip away at the things that we've added to that God has said. He's still going to do what he said, but he's going to do what he said, not what we thought he said. He's still going to put us in the story that he's written for us, but not the story that we've written for ourselves. So, and there's going to be conflict for a while until we let go of our story. Well, I give up. And God's like, yay! So giving up is not a bad thing. I can't do this on my own anymore. God's like, yay! Right, you can't. I'm so glad. I wore you out on purpose. I made you let that go on purpose. I'm still going to use you. I'm still going to do everything I said I'm going to do. But now I don't have to fight you because I've worn you out. You're now limp. I've deadened your leg, Jacob, so you can't even walk anymore. So you can't stop running away from what I have for you.
You're welcome.
So just understand that sometimes when we're at our lowest point, that's when God's like, yay, now I'm just about to promote you. We're not out of his will. We've now fallen into it finally. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you again. The 3 people who listen in. You're so devoted and wonderful. Of course, I'm joking, because it's at least 5 people. Okay, so and on Wednesdays we finally gotten off the cross and into the tomb. We're in the book of Matthew, and we'll be continuing there. And then in a month or so, we'll be starting new books of the Bible. So it's from almost at the end of both of these chapters. Thank you so much. Dismiss. And I will see you soon. Oh, and if you're a member of Good Shepherd, go to the Good Shepherd page at 11 o'clock for our Sunday service. Thank you.